this just in, we take you to Game 6 out in LA. Dodgers looking to punch their ticket to the Fall Classic. Shohei doing Shohei things in the bottom of the 6th. That's with an RBI in this one. He's going to send a man home for LA to extend their lead over the Mets in this one. Then we take it to top of the 9th. Francisco Alvarez trying to get something going. Anything going to extend the Mets' time, but instead grounds out to second, and that, my friends, is all she wrote. Dodgers making their way to the World Series, their 22nd appearance in franchise history, and their first since that 2020 World Series team. Making their way, punching their ticket, will now be facing the New York Yankees in the Fall Classic, getting this one to the tune of 10-5 over the New York Mets. We are now joined by MLB analyst and former Marlins president David Samson. And David, what a series this has been. And I feel like I felt so smart when I would say, you know, the first person that strikes first in a game goes on to win that game and by a large margin. But instead, this time around, it was the Mets who struck first, and the Dodgers wanted to make sure they retaliated in this one. Just looking at LA's offensive output in this one, what about their bats impressed you most?
Well, their bats have been impressive all season long, but let's talk about what they did today. Yes, they gave up a run in the top of the first, which this series means that's it. Mets win. Yeah. That's what happened the first 5 games.
So we thought.
Bottom of the first comes Manaea, who was lights out this postseason. He could not repeat his delivery. He was leaving the ball up. The Dodgers hitters were not fooled, and guess what? The Dodgers answered. Not a shutdown inning for Manaea, a crooked number for the Dodgers, and they scored 2 and were up 2-1 after 1 inning. And the pressure then went squarely onto the Mets because it was clear that Manaea wasn't going to have it, and that changed the entire way Carlos Mendoza had to manage this game. Whereas Dave Roberts knew he was going to get a bullpen game, he was prepared for the bullpen game, and when you see what the Mets had to do with bringing in Diaz in the 4th inning, then Stanek, then Senga, it was an absolute disaster for the Mets because they couldn't find a way to get anybody out. The Dodgers scored double-digit runs again, and they are on their way for their 22nd World Series.
I want to dive more into the Mets outing, but first I want to talk about coming into this game. We had that chat about the Dodgers having to rely on their bullpen in this one, but what did you make of how they performed in this outing?
Well, we talked about what the keys to the game are, and we wanted Ohtani and Betts to perform. We said they had to get on base 4+ times. They did. We said the bullpen had to perform. They did. And the thing about their lineup is we talk about Ohtani. We talk about Betts. How about talking about the trade deadline acquisition? Tommy Edman with a 2-run home run, and on top of that, a 2-run single. He was the catalyst for this. So up and down that lineup, Will Smith contributes, goes deep with a 2-run home run. So we're talking about a lineup that when you get production from the bottom, and you've got the top with Ohtani, Betts, and still no Freeman, but Teoscar had a great game. That's a team that becomes unbeatable.
Let's go back to those keys, because we talked about the keys to a Dodgers victory. We talked about the keys to a Mets victory. And when we were looking at the Mets, you talked about scoring first. You talked about that crooked number. Talked about Manaea needing to have a day. Instead, went 2 innings, allowing 6 hits, 5 earned runs. Diaz and Stanek, relievers couldn't quite get it done. You said you wanted to see a big day from Francisco Lindor. But now just looking at how this game came about, what's next for these Mets?
Well, first of all, what's next for the Mets is they're going to fly home, and they're going to fly home with their head high, and here's why. It hurts. Losing the LCS, I've never done it, 1-0 in the LCS, but here's the thing about what the Mets have done. I can't tell you that they're the lovable underdogs with grimace and everything else. They've got the highest payroll in the game, so they're not underdogs. That said, what they did this year to come from so far back, so far under, where their owner was saying they were going to trade players and be sellers at the deadline, to go all the way to a Game 6 in the League Championship Series in what may have been Pete Alonso's swan song as a Met. You have got to give them credit for the season they had and the performance they had and the breakout star, Mark Vientos. If the Mets win this series, he's the MVP of the series. Yeah. That's how well he performed. But the Mets look at themselves and they have an owner who's willing to spend. They've got a team that has Lindor, who will be the anchor. They have to decide about Pete Alonso, but all those decisions wait. Right now, you're hurting, but then you take a minute to revel in the season you had, and then if you're David Stearns, who is the president of baseball ops, you get back to work, not tomorrow, but Tuesday, getting ready for spring training.
That's why they say baseball's not won in May. Certainly a different story. If you look at just the Mets season as it progressed, certainly there's no moral victories, however, but looking at how they've been able to make it to where they are and perform the way they did in Vientos, also having that big grand slam in Game 2, but falling to the Dodgers in this one. It is LA that stamped their ticket to the Fall Classic. But taking a look at the most RBI in a postseason series, well, Tommy Edman having himself, I mean, David, you're looking at the screen. Tommy Edman having himself an outing, 11.
This is Tommy Edman, who is batting cleanup.
Yeah.
This is the man they acquired in that 3-team deal with the Cardinals and the White Sox, along with today's starting bullpen opener, Kopech. So guess what? Edman, when everyone's talking Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, and Teoscar, who was also signed this year for 1 year, Edman contributes at this level. And if you're the Dodgers, you're feeling really good about yourself when Tommy Edman's doing that.
Certainly makes you feel good about yourself when you get a trade acquisition that does that work in the postseason.